on the item. Obviously, you don't have to make an appointment. You can just come in and sit and talk and compare ideas or get answers. Sometimes we can even solve problems in real time. So just to let you know, we're going to start here in about 1 minute. But again, as I call your name, I'm going to call them in like groups of three so that you can be as expeditious as possible in coming up. And if you'll state your name for the record and then make your comments. Again, under our ordinance, you do have up to 3 minutes. And given that there's so many people, if you hit 3 minutes, I'm going to have to cut you off. But please be as expeditious as possible so we can hear from as many people as possible this evening. Thank you all in advance.
You might also remind them that we do not time.
Oh, yes, and then one of the reasons why I mentioned the mayor's open house is that at the mayor's open house, I respond. We have staff there, sometimes the city manager, deputy city manager, others, sometimes aldermen come. You can get answers in real time, and we can have a dialogue. We do not respond, regardless of what you would say in public comment. This is your time to say what is on your mind and your opinion. So there is not going to be a give and take between us and anyone this evening. All right. At this point, we are a little late in starting, and so I'm going to call the meeting of the Bloomington City Council to order. And if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and then please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Lauer,
Here.
Alderman Sage,
Here.
Alderman Malumboy,
Here.
Alderman Burgess,
Here.
Alderman Painter,
Here.
Alderman Schmidt,
Here.
Alderman Black,
Here.
Alderman Hallman,
Here.
Alderman Fruin,
Here.
Mayor Renner.
Here. Thank you very much. And again, we're going to start public comment in just a second, and I will round that up to 7:03. So at 7:33, we will half hour be completed. Serena Fish, Paula Stubblefield, and Henry Dick in those orders, and then Laura Dick. So if you would all be ready to come forward, Serena, Paula, Henry, and then Laura. Serena, thank you.
Hi, I'm Serena Fish, and I live at 909 Westwood Street in the west part of the city. A lot of people have some very important things to talk about tonight, so I'm just going to talk about when, once again, I am very happy with the people that work for the city of Bloomington. I had another instance. I brought something to the derelict house to the attention of Jim Karsh, who then sent me to Tom Daberreiner, who then sent me to Steve Adcock, a house that was derelict and falling in because it's close to a place of business that I deal with on a daily basis. I sent the information to them. Within a few days, the house was boarded up. There were people coming and going. It was being used as a squatter. I think some other things were going on there, but who knows. But they boarded the house up with the help of the police department. They have now since gone and looked for the owner, who was an elderly man who was moved out of the house when a tree fell on it, into a nursing home, who is since deceased. His heirs apparently want nothing to do with it, and now we're in the process of going through the system to get the house down. So I'm really sorry, people, but I'm really happy with you again. And the people that work for the city, the council as it stands, and I'll make it short and sweet. Please put the substation in. Thank you.
Okay. Again, next we have Paula Stubblefield, Henry Dick, Laura Dick, and then Renee Cook.
Hi, I'm Paula Stubblefield, and I'm here about the Black Lives Matter. Uh, I've gone through a race riot. I worked at a hospital where there was a race riot. A person was in, two people were injured, and we had both of them at the hospital. I'm sorry, I don't know what this Black Lives Matter means. I believe all lives matter. Black, blue, purple, green, two-headed, the deformed, whatever. We all bleed the same blood. Whatever it takes, in my opinion, note that, please, to cut down on violent crime in a neighborhood or area is what we need to do. I'd also believe in the community development of everyone getting to know everyone, including all the officers getting to know everyone in the community, wherever they are, east, west, north, south, or in the middle of the town. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, Henry Dick, Laura Dick, Renee Cook, and Devon Griffin.
I live on the west side, about 2.5 blocks from the proposed community house substation. I very much appreciated this council's vote to postpone the decision on this lease, and I and many of my neighbors had no idea this was about to happen. We had received a survey a couple of years ago in which a majority of residents indicated that safety was a concern, and from that concern, MCCA discerned that we needed a substation in our neighborhood. Over the last month, I have attended Chief Hefner's focus group, 2 listening sessions put on by MCCA, and went door to door asking my neighbors on the West Jefferson what they thought of the proposed substation. After hearing what my neighbors had to say, I can say without hesitation that I am opposed to the substation. The concerns I heard raised are contrary to the beliefs of MCCA. The police do not make everyone feel safe. I have neighbors who have been targeted by officers. I've heard stories about people being handcuffed and detained for not having ID. I've heard stories of police entering tense situations and escalating it rather than diffusing it. A black man being stopped regularly and described as suspicious for simply walking to work or to the store or to a friend's house. If you have participated in this discussion online, read comments to articles about the substation, or even listened to Chief Hefner describe opposition to the substation, it's important to recognize the bias from which this decision is being made. I and my neighbors who oppose this are not criminals. My neighborhood is a place that provides housing to homeless, support for folks in all of our group homes, housing for the minimum wage workers and people with criminal backgrounds who are virtually unemployable. I love my neighborhood because it supports many of the struggling people of our community. I am frustrated. I am frustrated because we aren't here talking about a TIF district in my hard-hit neighborhood that lost its Amtrak station, its Nestle bike factory, or all the other manufacturing that used to be there. I am frustrated because we aren't talking about funding for rental assistance or childcare or a resolution to increase the minimum wage. I'm frustrated because a grant meant to fund quality, affordable housing should not be used like this. I'm frustrated that what's on the table today is at best a PR blessing to the Bloomington Police Department and at worst another tool to increase our prison population. Y'all have power over the direction of my neighborhood today. You can call this a community house or a substation, but ultimately you are asking me to expect that the criminal justice system can solve our chronic issues by having officers sit in a residence and watch my neighbors. Maybe have a barbecue 4 times a year. Do not vote to further exacerbate the struggles of the marginalized today. Help us with real solutions. Thank you.
Okay. Laura Dick, and then Renee Cook, Devon Griffin, and Louis Grossland.
Again, my name is Laura Dick, and my husband and I wrote you all an email. Thank you, those of you who replied and let me know that you got that email. In that email, it was very clear that we are very much against the substation. We live at 819 West Washington. We have roots that in this neighborhood that goes back 40 years. Where we live now, we've lived for 20 years. We love our neighborhood. We feel safe. I walk at all hours of the day and night, and so does my husband. But we are not of color. And we have seen incidents in our neighborhood where police officers have not acted respectfully toward people of color. And yet we are not willing to deal with some of the institutional biases that we have. And we need to confront them, as I said in my email. For those of you who are not representatives of West Bloomington, I'd like to give you a couple other things to think about that I only touched on in my email when you think about how you're going to vote. According to what we were told in the open meetings, that if anyone comes forward to buy this house, that the police will immediately move out. And yet you're talking about spending a significant amount of money making this house accessible. Ask yourself, how are you going to explain to your community why you invested money in West Bloomington in a house that the city of Bloomington does not own, and you do not have the guarantee of a long-time lease? The other thing is, the idea of accessibility didn't even come up until this week. You don't even know how much it will cost to fix this little house to make it accessible. This is not a well thought out plan. The other thing that I would challenge you is go look at the Bloomington Police Department Twitter site. And it is the official Twitter site. On December 7th, there was a posting of 828 West Jefferson stating, "This is our new substation." Now, is that the decision of the council, or is it not? Is that a case of the dog wagging the tail? Really? Consider that. This is your decision. It isn't the chief's decision. You are representing the city. If the chief is making this decision, then who do we appeal to? I thought we appealed to you. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Renee Cook, Devon Griffin, Louis Grossland, and then Billy Kirkton, I believe. Is that right?
Hello, my name is Renee Cook, and I grew up on the west side of Bloomington. I graduated from BHS and received a Presidential Scholarship Award from the Boys and Girls Club. I then attended the community college at Parkland in Champaign. I thank God for places like the Boys and Girls Club and the Western Avenue Community Center. I feel I owe my success to these community services and programs as I was a part of as a kid. These programs were safe for me to go to, and they helped me cope with the trauma and grief that I experienced after losing my father at a young age. Although I've been blessed in my life, there are still struggles that I face today. The same problems, I had some problems over the summer with my mental health, and the officers who responded were not trained to help me. They didn't understand my situation, and they were aggressive in how they treated me. They were quick to judge, and they treated me like a criminal instead of understanding me. It could have been worse if another West Sider was not there to explain the problems that I was going through. This is my story, but I have many neighbors that have their own stories right here on the West Side with bad encounters with the Bloomington Police Department. Every day on my block, officers do their rounds. When the kids get out of school, I see several officers patrol my neighborhood every day. The West Side already has plenty of police. We do not have enough access to services that are needed by my neighbors and I. We need a place where young people and my neighbors who are struggling can get the help that they need. We need more mental health services and affordable housing and other programs for the community. It is not the police role to meet these needs of the people in this community. We as a community can come together to accommodate the needs of the people. We don't need a substation, so please vote no.
Thank you very much. We next go to Devon Griffin, Louis Grossland, and Billy Kirkton.
My name is Diva Griffin, and I seek
I'm sorry.
Diva.
I mispronounced it. Thank you.
My name is Diva Griffin, and I seek my time to Sonny Garcia.
Actually, we're not able to do that. Did you sign up separately?
Yes.
I'm sorry. This is just according to our rules. That the 3 minutes goes to the person who has signed up. I apologize, but we will. If you, Diva, is that right? If you want to finish your time, you can, And I don't know whether we're going to get to Mr. Sonny Garcia. Again, I apologize. This is according to ordinance. You can't cede your time to somebody else. Okay.
My name is Diva Griffin. I moved here from Mississippi a year and a half ago. I worked at the African American Military History Museum, but we were also opening a museum for civil rights. So I spent most of my growing up time in college around members of the civil rights movement who taught me a lot about racism and the things that they did to combat racism during a time when they couldn't even vote, but they were going off to their country to die and fight in Vietnam and Korea. And so I moved up north to work in social services, and I come here and I was vastly disappointed. Vastly disappointed in the area because growing up somewhere so diverse, I wondered, why does everything blocked off? Why in one part of town where it's a lot of minorities does it look so bad? Why aren't people being treated properly? Then I started talking to people in these neighborhoods, longtime residents who would complain about being harassed by the police, new residents who were warned by the old residents, watch out, the police are going to come get you. They're bothering people in the neighborhood. And sure enough, that's what happened. Now, growing up in Mississippi, you hear that the North is a lot better. And I think coming here has shattered that perception for me. Then I found out that they were they were opening a police substation to further police these people who are already afraid of the police. And I look around this place and I see all these things that these people need. And what you try to give them is more policing, not access to mental health services, not youth programs, not all these things that are proven to help communities. You give them more police, which they have told me personally that they're frightened of and feel targeted by. This is why I think that you should choose no for the substation. Um, it was very surprising that that was the route that you took for it. And like I said, from the South, you hear a lot about the racism, and it's still very out there. But one point that I made to somebody in the group is at least in the South, when there's racism, it's in your face, and it's not behind the scenes and they try to hide it. I would prefer that it be up front and that they go ahead and tell you ahead of time what they're doing instead of continuing to police neighborhoods and make people feel unsafe based on the color of their skin or because they're poor or because they live in a certain area. Thank you.
Thank you. Louis Grossland, Louis, and then Billy Kirkton, and then Michael Donnelly.
My name is Louis Gosland. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all. So I live on the west side. I live over on West Washington. This substation is practically going to be in my backyard. And I moved to the west side earlier in the year, and I noticed how things quickly changed in what I was used to just a little bit further east. When I moved to the west side, it didn't take long before I started seeing people hassled in a way by the police that I didn't think would be allowed in a community. I've seen someone who lives just a couple houses down from me have their car towed out of their own driveway for having an air freshener in there after getting pulled over down the block for one of those Christmas tree air fresheners. Just a couple nights ago, I saw an elderly woman who lives across the street from me pulled out of her house and cuffed and just totally dumbfounded as to why this was happening to her, and told it was because she didn't provide an ID to officers. And then when the officer saw that myself and other neighbors were filming, now all of a sudden she's out of cuffs and released with no charges. And so I think it's easy for a lot of folks who don't have to experience this and who don't live on the west side to act like this problem doesn't exist, and to prescribe solutions for chronic social outcomes in our community without having a full understanding of the experiences that people are there. Now, that includes nonprofits who operate in the area, because a lot of those folks don't live in the neighborhood either, and they talk to a few people who are willing to talk to them. But I saw a survey that was released by one of the stakeholders in this substation, and in the survey I didn't see who they talked to, I didn't see whether or not they talked to folks like the neighbors that I've seen pulled away, or if they talked to people who I've heard in the community say that they'd like to see every teenager who steps foot in Friendship Park locked up. Now, these are the two kind of experiences that are happening on the west side. You've got one subset of neighbors who are on the brunt end of racial injustice and injustice at the hands of the criminal justice system. You have other folks in the neighborhood who buy into a narrative that I feel that this substation perpetuates, which is that you live in a criminal neighborhood and you should be scared of your neighbors. You should worry about where you live, and the only thing that's going to help this is greater police presence. What you're saying when you say that is that we're not willing to look at the root of the problems that play out in some of our neighborhoods. Instead, we want to increase the enforcement mechanism that's already hassling and harassing people who live there. The other thing that I want to mention is I've been going to these community listening sessions, and I was at the meeting where this council decided to delay for community input. And as I read the headlines and attend these community sessions, I hear opposition. Every person who speaks in these things are opposing this. Everyone that I'm talking to opposes this. And so why this council feels that today they can make a vote on this any better than they could at the end of last month is beyond me. The community doesn't want this, and if MCCA and this council has a genuine interest in community input, open your eyes, open your ears, and actually give yourself the opportunity to reconsider. I don't know if it's pride, I don't know if it's funding on the part of these nonprofits, but
Your time is up.
Let
I'm
go.
sorry. Thank you. Billy Kirkton, Michael Donnelly, and Mike O'Donnell.
Yeah, my name is Billy Kirkton. I also live in the 800 block of West Washington. The proposed substation will be just around the corner from my house. This project has largely been justified by a survey conducted by MCCA, which we're going to hear more about in just a bit. And they're going to tell you that it demonstrates all the support in the neighborhood for the substation, but anything more than a passing glance at their results raises questions about the way it was conducted, who they reached out to, and whether or not this really represents the will of the community they're ostensibly committed to serving. So for the survey they conducted in the last month, and remember this was just the result of public outcry, it was a response to all the pushback they got in December, they broke the area immediately around the location into two zones. Zone 1 was reached out to door, and they're going to tell you in a bit that the majority of those were in favor of the substation. But it bears acknowledging that they only successfully reached 82 out of the 189 households in that area, which is only 43%, less than half of the homes there they're basing this on. Zone 2 covered a few additional blocks in every direction from the substation, for whom the survey was available online. But because it was available online, we have no idea who filled it out, whether they were even Westside residents or would be affected by this at all. MCCA has not shared this information. I also attended the meeting hosted by MCCA at Wayman AME last week, which they've categorized the feedback from as varied, which definitely wasn't my experience at the meeting, where the overwhelming majority of people there, nearly every single comment, repeated the same refrains over and over. We do not want a greater police presence in our neighborhood, and that you can call it whatever you want, but no true community house can exist when the keys to the front door are in the hands of the police. There was nothing varied about the response in these meetings, and their characterization of it as such has only demonstrated to me personally that no amount of input that they've received in the last month would have made them change course from their predetermined conclusion to get this thing pushed through. But most importantly, what you won't find in any of these results that MCCA has shared are the racial demographics of the folks they reached. There's been no acknowledgement of this whatsoever, and is already pointed out by several others in a society and culture that is permeated at every level by the effects of systemic racism, law enforcement included, in which communities of color are over-policed, overcharged, and murdered by cops in the streets at grossly disproportionate rates across the country. The supposed safety that comes from a greater neighborhood police presence tends to vary pretty wildly based on who you ask and the color of their skin. And for MCCA not to take this into account and share this information is misleading, and it's reckless. So while MCCA will tout the results of this survey
Sir, you're
and
gonna
talk
have
about
to
all the people who will
finish
feel
up.
safer with more police in their neighborhood, the question remains who will feel safer and who is the substation serving. And without answers to these questions, I and many others who live nearby are completely opposed with its presence in our neighborhood and the process
Okay,
through
I'm
which it was
sorry.
sold to this council. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Okay. Michael Donnelly and Mike O'Donnell and Tasha Davis.
Good evening, everyone. So for me, I always think about community as that the things that we try to do in our community are about inclusion and not about division. And I feel like a lot of the conversation right now is more about division. When I think about the substation, I think about it in a sense that I feel in our community that we're lucky to be in a community where our police departments are thinking about alternative policing methods. There's a lot of things that are happening across the nation. I'm not sure what other strategies other communities are employing right now. But for me, I don't think there's any ill intent by the police substation. I've talked with the chief. I've talked with other individuals. I'm a kid that grew up on the west side. I know Bloomington very well. My mother was very involved in things, and so as a kid, I came up through that. And I guess it's disappointing in a sense because, again, I believe that this is just an opportunity for us to do something that's different, for us to do something that's outside of the box, that's not traditionally what's done, and for organizations that are wanting to have this conversation. I believe that it's a two-sided conversation. I think about my role right now. I work with young people at the Boys and Girls Club, and I had a situation where an officer came and talked to me about a family that he was dealing with. And in that moment, it would have been very easy for me to just see him as an officer. But I took a step back and looked at him as a person, and I could see the real hurt that was in his eyes, the same hurt that I see that I've had myself when I think about other communities and some of the things that have happened in those communities, some of the things that I've seen happen with young African American males. But this was a white officer, and he was passionate about what he was talking about. He was just trying to do his job and was just being met with a lot of resistance. So I feel like in our community, if we're going to have this conversation, then what we need to do is we need to set a platform where we can have a real conversation and listen to one another, see the human side of one another, and then maybe we will get some results. But simply bumping up against heads over things that are more about trial and error sometimes, things that are about just having an opportunity to see. I feel like I've seen the cost of what this is going to cost. It's not a big cost to the city at all. But it's an opportunity to potentially do something that might be able to be modeled in other communities if it's done appropriately. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. And then Mike O'Donnell and Tasha Davis, and I think that's about all we'll have time for.
Evening, members of the council. Thank you. My name is Mike O'Donnell. I live at 912 West Oakland. I'm here as a spokesperson for the West Bloomington Revitalization Project. I serve as president of their board. We are in support of the community house for three reasons. First of all, it's consistent with the intent and the objectives that were first expressed by over 300 residents of West Bloomington as part of a whole series of summit meetings which were held in 2007 and 2008. And one of the important results of that series of summit meetings was objectives to improve neighborhood safety and to reduce crime. Secondly, we have been a member of the West Bloomington Housing Collaborative along with Mid-Central Community Action and Habitat for Humanity for over 4 years. This community house idea has been discussed and planned for a long time and with input from the residents. And we believe that it's consistent with our efforts to build relationships with the Bloomington Police Department and our residents, such as the project with the COP project, which we co-sponsored back in April of 2016. And thirdly, because we believe this is an opportunity for us to work together with the police department and our community partners and residents to build those relationships, and we are committed to doing everything possible to make that happen. Thank you.
Okay. Tasha Davis. And I can probably get one more in. Vicki Smith.
Hello, my name is Tasha Davis. I am an employee at Mid-Central Community Action, but I don't come speaking on behalf of Mid-Central. I come speaking as a resident. I've been on the west side of Bloomington for over 20 years. I recently just relocated because of my safety, what I felt was unsafe for me. I'm going to give you a story about where I live. I lived on Olive Street, 1107 West Olive, and there was a stabbing. I had to call the police 4 times before someone came out. And the fear and the trauma that I experienced for that moment, there was always something going on. If it wasn't at one corner of Western or Morris, there was always something going on in my neighborhood. I couldn't get from work to my house without driving past a bunch of children, or I won't even say children because I do believe that these were young adults or teenagers or whatever have you. But safety was important for me and for my family, and I didn't feel safe in my own neighborhood. I grew up on the west side of Chicago in the Henry Horner projects. I came to Bloomington for safety because this was totally different than what I've known before. Forgive me if I get emotional. I loved my home, a 4-bedroom home, but I couldn't stay there because of fear of living in my own home. It was not safe, and I know a lot of people say that they can walk through or whatever have you. I didn't feel safe. My children didn't feel safe. And is it fair to me and my family that we can't live where we want to live? There's nothing wrong with living on the west side of Bloomington, but safety is important. And if you don't feel safe for your family, what do? You have to relocate. And I didn't want to relocate, but I felt like I was forced to do so. And if we could clean up the neighborhood by building a relationship with the police, we talk about racism and all of that. That's not going to change here. That's not just in Bloomington. That's all over. And it starts with a mindset. So having a substation or community home or whatever people are calling it, that's not changing the issue. That's a nationwide issue. So what we're trying to do is bring safety in our neighborhood, bringing collaborative together with our community and our community leaders. I see nothing wrong with it. I actually would applaud it, and maybe I'll come back to my home.
Vicki Smith.
My name is Vicki Smith. I live in the 700 block of West Jefferson Street. I've been there 21 years and on the west side for many years before that as well. I've seen the good and even more of the bad happen in our area. Community policing in our area has done a lot to help deter crime. It's got our neighbors out, getting to know each other, help each other, and they start becoming involved in things that are going on in the area and trying to make a difference in our area. The more people that are out, the less the opportunity is for crime to occur because there's more eyeballs watching what you're doing. I speak not only for myself, but for my neighbors in the 700 block as well as some neighbors on the 8 and 700 blocks of West Monroe Street. We are in favor of the police substation in our area. We believe it'll bring about a sense of security, more opportunities to break barriers, and more pride to be built and more involvement so we can have a true sense of community back in our area and people can become involved and engaged in the area to make a difference. Please support this positive aspect of our neighborhood.
Great. Thank you very much. And again, my sincerest apologies for those of you who didn't get a chance to come forward. We're going to go ahead and move forward with the consent agenda. And as I said, we will be discussing this shortly. We don't have a back and forth between some of the, on an individual basis for public comment. Are there any items that need to be removed from the consent agenda by members of the council?
Item G.
Item G, 7G. Okay. Anything else? Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented with the exception of item 7G?
So moved.
Moved by Alderwoman Painter. Is there a second?
No second.
Second by Alderwoman Schmidt. Any discussion? Seeing none, if you'd please just go ahead and cast your vote. The The motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. We are going to move along to item 7G that you pulled. You just needed to recuse yourself. Okay. Is there a motion to approve item 7G from the consent agenda as presented?
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
Moved by Alderwoman Howman. Is there a second?
Second, sir.
Second by Alderman Lauer. Any discussion on this? Okay, again, an aye vote would be in favor of item 7G as presented on the consent agenda. The motion carries 8-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. I wonder if we can go ahead and get Alderwoman Burgess. Oh, there she is, back on track. The next item under our regular agenda is item...
justice! No peace!
Excuse me, we do have some decorum in our meetings, and I'm going to have to insist on that, please. We do have time for public comment. There are any number of times that you could come to talk to me or go to a mayor's open house. We appreciate that. If you have signs, you're certainly welcome to do that. But in terms of shouting down a city council, I can't let that happen. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go with Mr. Juergens.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. Tonight we have an action in front of you that's a little unusual in that it's an administrative review action from a zoning board case. A petition was filed seeking 2 variances to allow an accessory structure at 1422 Butchers Lane in the city of Bloomington. The zoning board of appeals voted 4 against, 2 in favor, 1 abstained. Since less than 5 voted against the variance petition, the zoning code allows an appeal to the city council. It is now the function of the city council to review the administrative record and make a determination as to whether the record supports the granting of the variances based on the criteria outlined in the city code, specifically section 44.13-4D. I do have those variance standards up on the screen. They're also in your materials. Since this is an item for administrative review, no staff recommendation is given and no further evidence should be considered. Hopefully everybody received the administrative record, which we emailed out last Monday, and it's also in the packet along with the audio recording of the meeting that's been available to the council. 2 alternate ordinances have been provided for use by the council, one that would uphold the action of the Zoning Board of Appeals and the other ordinance that would reverse it. So at this time, it would be appropriate for the City Council to discuss this action item and to make a determination as to whether or not to uphold or to reverse the decision of the Zoning Board of Appeals.
This one, just to clarify, we are bound as a City Council by the evidence that was already collected.
That is correct.
And so we must make our determination based on those facts and those facts alone.
Right, and just for the audience and those listening, the record essentially consists of the meeting minutes, the petition that was filed, the staff recommendation that was on file, the copies of the petitions, the notices, the audio recording of the meeting.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start by asking if is there a motion for either 1 or 2 or questions of Mr. Juergens?
I'm prepared to make a motion, Mayor. We've been given 2 options here, one to uphold the Zoning Board of Appeals decision and one to reverse it. My motion is that the decision of the Zoning Board of Appeals be reversed and an ordinance approving the petition for variances be approved.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I would second it.
Second by Alderman Lauer. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, just so that everyone understands that the decision of the Zoning Board of Appeals, again, the Zoning Board of Appeals was divided, but the decision of the Zoning Board of Appeals be reversed, the notice of appeal be granted, and an ordinance approving the petition for variances be approved. And let's see, Alderwoman Burgess.
If Alderman Schmidt would like to speak first.
Yours first?
Well, it's in Ward 6, and I'm certainly prepared to speak to it, but Amelia, if you want to go? Or...
It was your motion, so I don't want to.
Okay. Well, thank you. So first of all, I want to say that I think this council is extremely cautious and judicious about questioning the decisions that our staff recommend and that our board and commissions put forward to us. So as Jeff said, this is a really unusual circumstance. I went and visited the property, as I believe several of you did as well. And I wanted to just very briefly outline some of the circumstances that leads me to support this appeal and that I also think
speak to the finding of facts that we have in front of us. First of all, and I also want to say that, it seems to me that our zoning code is um, pretty inflexible, and so when you have something that sits outside it in a way that this particular property does, I think it doesn't leave our staff very much room for being flexible. This particular property is 6.1 acres, so it's far, far larger than the normal residential lot. The surrounding environment is really quite unusual. On one side, there's agriculture and farm field. Behind it, the train goes by it. It's right next door to county property. The residential areas that are around it are shielded by quite a bit of distance and trees and hills. And the county property that's right across the road from this has a very significantly larger property structure. The property owner originally brought this to the zoning board about a year ago and took that feedback and worked with the property that they have and moved the building that they're proposing to make it quite a bit less visible to the city property owners, and also made it smaller. They plan to remove a number of dilapidated structures, which will improve the property itself and significantly clean it up. And the neighborhood support that we heard was originally, there were some negative and a fair amount of support. I think it's important to say that the closest neighbors to them are in support, including the neighbor that's directly behind the property in Woodland Hills, Woodland Ridge. 3 immediate neighbors on Butcher's Lane have indicated their support and sent emails and provided testimony. And the end of Butcher's Lane has only 7 homes, and 3 of them are actually owned by this particular family. I'll leave it at that, but I think that we have such an unusual circumstance here, and we have an opportunity to improve the property, and I really feel that these property owners have made a strong accommodation to do the best that they can and to clean up their property. Thank you.
Alderman Burgess, Alderwoman Burgess.
Thank you. And generally, the zoning code is a wonderful tool that is used by the city, and it is a standard set of rules that apply to everyone, and apply to everyone equally. However, we do allow, in certain circumstances, for people to come to the Zoning Board of Appeals and say, the rules should not have to apply to me, which is an extraordinary or interesting opportunity. And the code further defines when we can do that, when we can say to people, you're right, these rules should not apply to you. In this particular instance, the petitioner simply has not met the 5 required findings in order to justify receiving a variance. And in reviewing the record, that opinion was unanimous among the Zoning Board of Appeals. I know the vote was 4-2, but the people who opposed it stated clearly they did not believe it had met the requirements and therefore could not approve it. But the 2 who voted in favor said, we agree that it does not meet the requirements, but we would like to deviate from them. So I think that's an important contextually to keep in mind. There certainly are interesting aspects to this property. I can understand the argument that it is more similar to a rural area than to an urban area, but regardless, they were annexed into the city. And when they were annexed into the city, there were rules they now had to follow. And it's sometimes a little difficult, I think, from reading these to really understand, but in this particular case, there's not a request for a minor variance here. This is a request to build a building that is almost 3 times larger than what anyone else in the city is allowed to do. And in fact, based on the ground floor square footage, if this were a 2-story home, it'd be nearly 6,000 square feet. I mean, that is a very large building. And the one thing I learned when you're on the Zoning Board of Appeals is that once you make a decision and you deviate from that zoning code, you're stuck with it. So if the area continues to change in its nature and urbanize because it is in the city, then suddenly we'll have this very inconsistent building with what anyone else in the city can do. So I'm very concerned here that we need to look only at the finding of facts required. We can't take into account the fact that we want to be nice. We can't take into
Under our zoning code, we can't take into account the fact that this property is larger than normal. We simply can only look at these, and it is very, very clear to me they don't meet them. And I think it would be difficult for us as a council and for Zoning Board of Appeals if we don't follow this and we don't follow the rules here to explain to other individuals when they come before the Zoning Board of Appeals or City Council why we won't grant their variance. If we can't do it, if we can't stick to the rules here, how can we do it elsewhere? Let me think. Oh, and the last thing I wanted to add, though, is that I am sympathetic to the petitioners here and their point of view, but the variance to me is not the right direction to go in because they don't meet those finding of facts. That does not leave them without some potential avenue of recourse. The two that come to my mind immediately are they could petition the City Council, where right now we're rewriting the zoning code. If they believe that the nature of their property should be taken into account with regard to the square footage of accessory structures, they can make those proposed changes to the zoning code while we're looking at it. The alternative is, if this truly is a property that is more consistent with rural property and should be treated more like county property, they can de-annex. That to me seems like a very rational request given that they are on the very edge of the city and most of the properties around them are in fact county properties. But as a result, I will be voting against option number 2 and would instead encourage my colleagues to support number 1, which is to uphold the Zoning Board of Appeals findings.
Other comments?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tony. Well, I'm inclined to support the petitioner on this one, simply because they have agreed to take down several existing buildings that are there already. And taking down a garage, a side garage, a barn, a chicken coop, a grain bin, and an outhouse, I think is a fair trade for a Morton building. And that's what I'm basing my opinion on. Thank you.
Karen?
Just a couple of other points I think we need to consider. As I read the record, I believe that the zoning code allows them to actually build the structure as long as they attach it to their house. And so that's just so incongruous to me. The law's an idiot and ass. That's the first thing that came to mind. The other thing is that we did talk about annexing it to the county, and I actually talked to their county board rep, Susan Schaefer, about whether that was even an option, and that was dismissed pretty much as soon as I got the words out of my mouth. The county is not interested in re-annexing property that they've given to the city. And even if they were, the city would still be, because of the proximity, city would still be probably looking at this structure. So I appreciate what Amelia is saying about the absolute granular reading of this, but I don't think it's a very realistic way to treat this property that I think sits so far outside the norm of the properties that we have.
Other comments?
I'd just like to apply a little bit of common sense here. I realize and I appreciate your strict reading and remuneration of the law. But again, it is our community. We have to look at the likelihood of this property being affected or affecting other properties in the neighborhood. And it doesn't appear to me that that's even a remote possibility for decades to come. It is very, very remote. It's surprising that we've got an area like this that is annexed into the city. And it is on our periphery, and they are making some definite improvements. And so using a little bit of common sense and looking at the real picture, the whole picture here, I think we have to go with number 2. If there was any chance of this being further developed into housing that would be affected by this building, I wouldn't feel that way. But I don't think that there's any, even a remote chance that that's going to happen in decades to come. So thank you.
Okay. Alderman Fruin.
Couple questions. The buildings that exist there today, is that an intent to take those down, or is that a commitment?
It's a commitment.
Commitment, okay. Very unusual property, that's for sure, because I've been out there and I've looked at it from the different sides, and I've got out of the car and looked at it. Very, very unique. So even with my planning commission experience, I always ask myself about precedent. So who can answer the question about precedent? Well, this decision tonight, if we would approve it, what does that do for other like appeals in that area?
Of course,
I
there
know
may
it-
not be any that are like that, but Alderwoman Burgess, did you want to respond?
Not specifically to that. I was
Oh,
just going
okay.
to wait.
All I'm going to say is what's next? What's 6 months from now or 12 months from now with a different property owner? Tell me how precedent could or could not be impacted. Is this an isolated decision?
Alderwoman Schmidt?
I would offer that I would sincerely hope that a revised zoning code would address that. You know, I mean, you're in real estate. How many 6.1 acre lots with a house on it are you able to, you know, in your inventory? You know, I mean, this isn't like anything else. And I would hope that a new zoning code would give our staff the tools to make some of these determinations that shape the look and feel of a neighborhood. So,
Okay.
Mayor, one other question for another day. Is the membership on the Zoning Board of Appeals where we want it to be? We've had these issues in the past, maybe not the Zoning Board of Appeals, but where we've had a minimum number of voters and sometimes a situation
We
will come to us.
almost all, other than our Sister Cities Committee, I think we have, I think we are now full. There may be one or two, but that's not the case with here. Yeah. I'm sorry.
well, the issue here, I think, is that we had an abstention because of conflict of interest.
Okay. So our desired committee size is 7 here? Is that the?
For
the vote was-
zoning.
The vote was 4-2? And one abstain?
One abstention.
And nobody missing, I don't
Yeah.
believe.
Right.
I just want to clarify and we need to keep that number up.
Right.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Burgess.
2 points. Number one is Jim brings up a good question, which is these stated intentions to remove other buildings. I've learned the hard way that petitioners can make a lot of comments and they can make a lot of promises. Unless that is a condition of receiving a variance, they are not required to follow through. So while that is a nice intent, and perhaps they will follow through with it, circumstances could change. They could build this building if we gave them the variance, and there would be no ability for the city to say to them, hey, but you promised you would remove these other buildings. That simply would not be enforceable, and I learned that the hard way when I was new on the Zoning Board of Appeals. The second one is, I think both Alderman Lauer and Alderman Schmidt make good points about concerns about the state of the zoning code and whether or not they're comfortable with how it's applied here. However, that is not something we can take into account here. When we're elected as a member of council, we agree to follow the ordinances of the city. And the ordinances say you must make these 5 findings of fact. If you cannot, in your mind, state that they have met all 5 findings of fact, then we just can't give the variance no matter how much we would like to. Our only recourse then is to either change, and of course this is my opinion, but from a very organized, rational point of view, to me the only choice we have then as a council, if we're unhappy with how we had to apply the law to this particular scenario, we just need to change the law. We can't just avoid it here. But thank you.
Okay. All right. We've actually exceeded our time on debate on this, but at this point, we have a motion on the floor for item 2. There was a second. An aye vote would be in favor of option 2. The motion carries 7-2. There are 2 nays to announce, Madam Clerk.
Alderman Burgess and Alderman Freund.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we move along to our next item, which is consideration of approving the lease from the Mid-Central Community Action for the Jefferson Street Community House located at 828 West Jefferson Street to be used by Bloomington Police. And we do have a presentation by Police Chief Brendan Hefner and Mid-Central Community Action. It's 20 minutes, and I'm going to hold us all to 20 minutes because we have council discussion at 15, and I'm guessing it may be more than 15. But just to as a general point, to many of you, as a sort of a macro level response to our public comment, the city, regardless of what happens with this vote tonight, the city is involved and actively attempting to do what we can to revitalize historic Bloomington. We have community development block grant money, hundreds of thousands of dollars that we attempt to invest. We try to work with West Bloomington Revitalization. And frankly, several times I've managed to get grants for at-risk youth job programs. Unfortunately, sometimes one summer I'll get it and one summer I won't get it. And there are mental health issues, and that's why the council voted and took the political heat to raise a quarter penny sales tax. That's $2.4 million a year for mental health. And that money actually is going to the county. And so we cannot, it is unacceptable, right, to have the main mental health facility in McLean County be the McLean County Jail. So we are doing as much as we can, in the short run. We do have some limited tools, and unfortunately the state of Illinois is not being very helpful at getting us to really deal with social issues and, frankly, really improving the quality of life in certain neighborhoods. I grew up in a single-parent household. My mother and I were on and off welfare from the time I was 8 to the time I was 15. I spent a month in a homeless shelter. I look at the world from the bottom up. And every day I try to figure out what can I do to help citizens in our city and for them to have the same kinds of achievements that I've managed to make. So, and I'm always open to hearing whatever you might have, some ideas. But at this point, we're going to deal with a presentation of the issue at hand. If there are other issues that you ever want to bring to my attention, you can always come talk to me, and we can bring them to the City Council. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to our Police Chief, Brendan Hefner, and then I believe Matt Dratt from Mid-Central Community Action, and I'm going to hold you guys to 20 minutes since I held the audience to our time.
Absolutely understand that. Good evening, Council, citizens. Appreciate this opportunity to give this presentation again. I will be very brief. I've only added a little to my last presentation to you last month. As you see, as we started out, we had the crime map. And as you will see, citywide, two of the largest areas where we have a lot of crime was in the area of the proposed community house. That's one reason Mid-Central looked at it. The other area over there is the mall. So you can imagine what's going on over there, a lot of retail theft and things of that nature. If you go to Rage Online, you can look all this information up. We put it on there. It shows 15 incidents of gunfire within the previous 21 months, 8 shooting incidents within 200 feet of the proposed community house. These things were all taken in consideration when this location was chosen. And as I said, I will let Mid-Central expound upon that. This was just a definition when we talk about community policing. And as I had said before, obviously we know about the lease and all these things. No one has ever heard me utter one time that we are going to put more police at this location should this be approved. As a matter of fact, I think I told you respectfully last time that if I need to put more police officers somewhere, I will, because I can't wait to come here. I do what you all pay me to do. It has always been about community engagement and trying to better engage with the community, and particularly the youth, because those shooting incidents you saw, a majority of those unfortunately involve juvenile youth. We have a problem with that. Peoria has a problem with that. Decatur, Springfield, we are seeing that. And we know that if we can try to get to the youth before they get inside of some of these hybrid gangs, we can do better. People talked about some of the things we're doing. I looked at this opportunity to extend on what we've already been doing in the community, the things that you haven't heard about. I've heard a lot of things at night. I've heard a lot of other things. I'm not here to split hairs with people. My door is open if people want to come in and talk to me about things. I think as Mr. Donnelly put it, there's always two sides to every story. That doesn't matter. What we're trying to do is be out and engage citizens, and particularly the young. Before I got this job, I used to coach football on the west side. I know that youth need guidance over there, and I know when they're busy doing positive things, it keeps them out of harm's way and doing other things. But yeah, we're over there. We're not just patrolling. We try to engage when we can, and I look at the community house as an extension of that. This was a neighborhood walk. I hear a lot of things when I go on the neighborhood walks. And the way I look at it, and when people come up and ask me, all I say is, give us a chance. If you say we don't communicate well, or we don't have community engagement, well, I challenge you to give us a chance to improve upon that. We're not perfect. Our community isn't perfect, but we're trying something. We're trying to do something and take advantage of an opportunity that was afforded to us. They sought us out. We had the build birdhouses with a cop. We did all right. The kids really liked it, but we plan on doing it again. But we go beyond what you've been hearing a lot of, and we can do better, and we're going to try to do better. If you don't have any questions of me?
Just to be clear, when you said the decision was made, this is something that started, as I believe, back in 2002. This is something that community organizers and community organizations came to the city to propose. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, I believe it was 2012. But yes, could be 2002, I'm not sure, but yes, they sought us out because it was part of their grant. But if you allow me to turn it over to Mid-Central, unless you have some more law enforcement questions, I think they can get to the crux of a lot of questions and give a historical perspective on how we got here tonight.
While Matt's coming up, I'll just reiterate that what you're talking about, Mayor Renner, is back in 2002, Old Town Neighborhood Association, as chronicled by our West Side historian Ruthie Cobb, pointed out that this is something we've been talking about since at least 2002, and it's been an ongoing conversation with our neighborhood.
Okay. So obviously, while there are differences of opinion that we've heard from many this evening, much of this is an impetus. This isn't the chief of police deciding something.
It's not a one and done. Yeah.
Yes, just to clarify the facts, at least of the background here, even if we all don't agree. Yes, Mr. Dratt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and alderpersons of the City of Bloomington. My name is Matt Dratt. I am the Director of Resource Development and Community Engagement at Mid-Central Community Action. I'm joined this evening by Stacy Tutt, the Director of the University of Illinois College of Law Community Preservation Clinic. And on behalf of Mid-Central Community Action and the West Bloomington Housing Collaborative, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for considering this very important issue to our community. What I have learned, very simply, over the last 6+ weeks since the last council meeting is something that I think I knew all along in this community, having lived here for 30 years, but that there is much passion about making our community a better place. And everybody is agreed on that one thing. Everybody wants to be part of that conversation. And what I'd like to do is just try to be as good of a steward as I can of the time that I have allotted to go through some information that I hope segues into what the council brought us to previously, which is to try to engage further resident comments about the proposed community house. So quickly, Jefferson Street Community House is a project of the West Bloomington Housing Collaborative, Mid-Central Community Action, the Bloomington Police Department, and the Office of the Attorney General of the State of Illinois. I do want to make sure that I am clear about this. The West Bloomington Housing Collaborative's mission is to create affordable housing on Bloomington's west side, and this project does not change that. We continue to work diligently to do that. We're in the process of acquiring and rehabbing 13 homes and making them available to low-income families, and that will be what we do moving forward to the end of the Attorney General's grant. That doesn't change, and that has not changed in this process. The Jefferson Street Community House, as you have heard, has a very simple mission, and it's to be a location where individuals and families, police, and the community can interact positively with one another to create stronger, safer, and more vibrant neighborhoods. We are all very well aware of the perception that many in our community have about this part of their community And we all are very well aware that that perception is just wrong. There are amazing people living in this community, and there are more amazing people living in this part of it. And this project does nothing but create an environment in which that can be strengthened and made more possible. Really simply, what this is and what it isn't. This is a space for resident engagement, community police relationship building, and neighborhood revitalization. This is a space for intentional community building to occur in a very specific location. What it is not, by definition in the lease, is an armory, a detention center, or a location where surveillance operations can occur. This is a time-limited lease. This home is still open for a neighborhood officer program, which we have always wanted to do. But at the end of the day, this home remains available for an individual or a family who goes through the Next Step program to achieve and sustain financial stability and become a homeowner on Bloomington's west side.
Because we've had some questions about that, I want to zero in on this right now. If somebody were to want to buy this in 60 days from now, that doesn't mean that our lease is, that we get out.
No, it's actually an agreement between both parties to the lease that it may terminate at that point in time.
Okay, so, but both parties would have to agree to terminate the lease. Okay, because that had been, there were some questions by some people in the audience and residents from the area about that.
So again, just a very brief view of what the history of neighborhood engagement and resident revitalization has occurred. And I know there's been much discussion about the nature of which we came to this conclusion, came to this point in time. And so very briefly, back in 2013, NeighborWorks America, a national community development and community building and engagement organization that Mid-Central Community Action is a charter member of, and MCCA conducts a community impact measurement where safety becomes one of the number one issues for this part of our community. In 2014, a resident-led summit occurred, and earlier we heard information about earlier summits that was sponsored by State Farm and facilitated by Jim Caprera, who is a national community building and engagement expert. This was an event that was led by residents, and one of the factors that came out of this was a key area related to safety and the desire to have greater community engagement in this part of the community. Moving forward to 2015 and to present, there are resident leaders, people who live in the neighborhoods, who are on the governing boards of Mid-Central Community Action and the West Bloomington Housing Collaborative, who continue to share ideas about increased police engagement and neighborhood revitalization. This is a long history of looking at this issue. However, back at the last council meeting, the concern was raised that not enough people had an opportunity to understand what the project was and didn't have an opportunity to share their thoughts. So to supplement 3 years of resident input, we put together an intentional plan to get fresh resident impact before adoption and approval was developed. And I want to just walk through that with you right now. So this is what we did. We did door-to-door resident conversations and feedback collected via surveys in the area most affected by the location. And yes, we did divide the location up into 2 zones. That was just purely logistical because we asked other community organizations who wanted to be stakeholders and partners in this to come alongside us and help us engage the residents of this area in this conversation. And at least on 2 occasions, that request wasn't responded to. And so because of limited volunteers and staff resources, we did the best we could. But it wasn't for the lack of asking people to help us. We did conduct a listening session directly to engage people who were most affected by this project. While many people have spoken about the project and certainly deserve and have the right to have input, at Mid-Central Community Action at the West Bloomington Housing Collaborative, we felt it was most important to hear from the people who lived there.
Can you just very briefly in a sentence to summarize, was there about an even split? Was it majority against?
At what point?
In your listening sessions.
I think at the 2 listening sessions, The first listening session, I think that there was probably an even split, despite what people are trying to explain. I think at the second listening session, which was much more energetic in the discussion, I think that there were many people who were expressing opinions about that. And I think while there were concerns about police involvement in general and about the nature of this project, what came clearly out of the two listening sessions was a general overall consensus that community engagement and neighborhood revitalization within this project was something that was desirable.
Do I assume then by that the second session there was majority opposition?
I would say that that'd be a fair statement, yeah.
Yes, I would say that. Yeah.
Again, I know we need to have decorum, I'm sorry, and I'm going to have to insist on that. Yes.
I would say that it was a fair assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Feedback from residents outside this area was solicited. We also wanted to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to have access, so we had online versions, we had Spanish language versions. At both listening sessions, we continue to give people an opportunity to give feedback via the surveys. These are the two zones. These were not arbitrary. These were intentional. We could have spent much more time engaging a much wider engagement area. We just didn't have the people to help us do that. And we had a limited amount of time to do it. However, I want to make sure I reiterate this again. This is not a point action. This is a culmination of 3+ years of engagement. So here's the survey tool itself. 5 questions modeled after a nationally accepted measurement research tool related to safety and this particular project. Door-to-door walkthroughs and online versions. And I don't want to try to make you drink from a fire hose about this information, but I am trying to be a steward of the time that I've been allotted. So here's the survey questions. It has been stated that there was a concern about the survey related to our desire to understand where people lived who were answering the survey. And while anonymity is certainly has an effect on survey results, we needed to know from the people who were living in these areas what they thought. And so it seemed reasonable to ask them about that. Surveys were only part of a conversation that occurred in the door-to-door activity. So door-to-door survey results of 189 possible Zone 1 households, 82 were reached. Where they couldn't be reached directly, written information was left for them. The address of the web tool, an invitation to the listening session, surveys in Zone 2 were available online. And at the listening session, there I believe are outside of Zone 1, within Zone 2, over 600 households. Again, we requested help from other community organizations, and that help was not provided, so it was nearly impossible for us to go door-to-door to another 600 households.
One thing I do want to assert here about the statistical information that's been provided, I come from a research-based institution, we look at statistics all of the time. A 43% participation rate usually means you have a standard deviation or percentage of error of plus or minus 5%. So when you look at these numbers based on our sample size, you can extrapolate the numbers to the entire area based on that standard deviation of 5%. So when we show you the next percentages, you can add 5% or take away 5% from that number to get a sense of what that entire community would be saying. And we can say this, though, regrettably, only for Zone 1, because in Zone 2, we had only 24 in that, which is not a statistical significant number in which to extrapolate the data.
But that is a higher margin of error if you're dealing with an area which is much more transient and has a less affluent population, correct?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, when you're looking at a population that you're trying to survey, what you look at is those participation rates in that survey to determine how then it impacts that population.
But I mean, in terms of an error, they're not all alike. The heterogeneity of a population and the difficulty of getting hold of people, you could get 43% that are highly skewed.
Right, you can do that, but what we did is we actually approached it in a door-to-door at very different times of the day in order to create a more unified approach to this, and we actually went back through, knocked on doors yet again at different times of the day, such that we wouldn't just get people who were there at a set time or a set day. We tried to do it with a varied approach.
Thank you.
Okay. Very quick, you've seen some of this information already. Just question by question walkthrough. Again, do you feel safe? You can see the percentages there. Again, I don't want to gloss over anything, but the numbers are fairly straightforward. They are what they are. And I don't say that to be dismissive, but the numbers are the numbers. And there's the question about safety, about crime, about police engagement. And then finally the question which we thought came to the crux of it is, do you want a police engagement, a substation located in your neighborhood? And 91.5% said yes. There has been question about why we said police engagement center and then substation, community house. What we're trying to do is get people to understand the true overall nature of this project. We did use the term substation in that question. So to be clear about that.
But really, at the end of the day, this was never really meant to be a substation. This is not a law enforcement top-down thing.
That's correct.
Right.
However, that was the term that people understood, and that seemed to be the term that everybody lighted on, and we wanted to make sure that people had that understanding. Again, here's Zone 2 results, very different by percentage-wise, and you have this information in your packet. Here's a compilation of the two zones. So the Zone 1 listening session, make note of the number of individuals of the total that were from Zone 1. And then Zone 2 listening session. We, on all occasions, continue to solicit feedback by establishing a very specific email address that people could send information to, comments, no matter what that looked like. We have received not a single one. And this information was shared at both listening sessions. So, we did have opportunity to hear from community organizations about what some very specific concerns at our last West Bloomington Housing Collaborative Partnership Council meeting. We invited guests to specifically speak to us about their concerns. We heard them and we acted on that feedback by changing some very specific aspects of the lease.
What we heard from the community organization as well as at our listening session is that people wanted greater transparency and accountability. So what we did is that we established within the lease itself and made changes to it in which we put a minimum number of community engagement activities that would be hosted. We also wanted to make it clear that all engagement activities would be a collaboration between law enforcement and the West Bloomington Housing Collaborative, recognizing that there may be some strain with the relationships in law enforcement, but as we are coming together as a community engagement activities, we could bring national experts to help us in working on those relationships and creating a community policing and engagement center that would be available. In addition to that, we wanted accountability, so what also was included in the lease was a report back by law enforcement on the frequency in which the residents would be used. Again, these are minimums that we put in there. We hope once and if the lease is approved, we can then establish more memorandums of understanding with other nonprofit organizations and community engagement organizations to add in additional opportunities, but first we need a lease in order to establish those memorandums of understanding.
What about, was there ever any discussion of maybe having a group of 7 or 9 residents who'd be part of an advisory board?
We didn't discuss that, but I think that we would be very open to it. In each one of ours, we have requirements to have resident engagement. And that's actually the thing that got us most excited about all these listening sessions, is that people were so passionate about activities that they thought should happen in their neighborhood. We actually had people volunteer to provide services out of this house to engage with the community and came up with a lot of creative ideas for that.
Okay. And this is a question, Mr. Jurgens, again, whatever we decide, if this were to be approved and there's a lease, we can come back with an ordinance to create an advisory board? And that they would have to live in a certain area within proximity of this substation, whatever we're calling it. We know what we're, okay, all right.
Okay. At the end of the day, this is what we hope this project will do, very simply. Develop stronger police and resident relationships, develop stronger neighbor relationships. We heard over and over again, neighbors coming together to make effect on the narrative of their community. Revitalize an area neighborhood association where we have other neighborhood associations already poised to come together with residents of this area to help create a strong and vibrant neighborhood association. Create a strong neighborhood watch program. Facilitate partnerships with nonprofits, faith and multicultural communities, people already coming to us about that. Coordinate positive youth engagement. We had already at Mid-Central began to work with other youth organizations who are based on the west side of Bloomington to do these things. Create opportunities for resident leadership development. NeighborWorks has a community leadership institute that we can bring people from this part of the community to learn how to lead their neighborhood. But at the end of the day, one of the most important things for us to be able to sell homes is changing perception about Bloomington's west side.
And I'm going to have to, as I did with the...
What it's all about right there. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, we have, you may want to stay where you are because we may have council questions, but is there either a motion on the floor or beginning questions from the council? Alderman Scott Black.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Matt, Stacy, Chief, everybody that's here this evening. I appreciate you guys coming in. This has been a lengthy conversation, and I always appreciate all the feedback that we get as part of this. And I also want to thank BLM for their participation in this discussion. I think it's a good thing that we get more people that are involved here. And I also want to thank the council for taking the opportunity to put a pause after last month's feedback session and go back into the neighborhoods and get some additional supplemental fresh feedback here.
And it sounds like it's a better proposal than it would have been.
I would say so.
Yeah.
So I just want to ask two questions, and I want to make some remarks, and I'll try to be brief because I know everybody wants to weigh in on this. First of all, some of the questions that have been raised is, why is this being leased directly to the police department? Why aren't we going with another organization or not-for-profit?
If I may address that, when we originally applied for our grant funding, it was for $5 million to do more community engagement and economic development. But because the funds came from a foreclosure settlement, the AG wanted the priority to be affordable housing only. And in fact, we were limited to just that affordable housing component. However, when we did our listening sessions, all these engagements and the resident feedback came in with this idea, and we also had difficulties with the marketing of the properties, the AG's office granted us a variance for this purpose alone, to address the needs that were raised by the residents and to try to work on engagement with law enforcement in a more positive way. So our funding limits us in this way. Our grant funder will not allow us to lease it to a nonprofit agency, and if this lease isn't approved, the property will just go back on the market due to the grant restriction.
So it'll sit vacant if not approved?
Until we find somebody to purchase it, yes.
Okay. I've also heard some feedback about some of the adjustments in the ADA that we have to make to the facility. And what happens? Do we have to remove those out? Is that an inevitable outcome?
Not necessarily. In fact, one of the individuals who's most interested in the property needed it to be accessible. That was one of the things that was looked at in regards to that. In addition to that, we have special grant funding in order to house a veteran. So we actually think some of these accommodations that'll be made, changes to the property, will help in its ultimate marketability given the group that we are targeting for purchase of the property.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And again, I want to thank you for the presentation that you've done here and really kind of dispelling some of the myths that have been out there. I, for one, am very excited. I'm very enthusiastic that we have a new group of people that are weighing in on West Side issues. We've been talking about some of this stuff for a long period of time. This is the most robust public feedback I've gotten from all over the community, Bloomington, Normal, the county, Ward 7, all the other wards. I really like that we have people who are new to the process, who are excited to share their thoughts, and I hope they remain engaged. I hope that they will stay with us and make our community a better place. And you hit on this earlier, Matt, is that we may disagree on the how, but we all agree on the what, making West Bloomington, our historic neighborhoods, a better place to live. And these are tough for me because, you know, as the alderman for Ward 7, I always want to be the cheerleader for our historic neighborhoods. I want to be the guy that sells the best parts of our community and why I love and why I choose to live in West Bloomington. And talking about crime, people feeling unsafe and fearfulness is not really the thing I want to highlight. So I want to tell just a very brief story. I was out of town for a few days, and my neighbors, I caught up with them this weekend. They stopped by the house to see if I was doing okay. They wanted to know when they hadn't seen my car move over a period of time and the snow came, they were worried I got sick and they wanted to check in on me. That's the type of neighborhood fabric that I think makes West Bloomington so unique and so wonderful and such a great place to live. It's why I chose to live there. It's why many of you chose to live there. And I think we can't lose part of that. I love our diversity. I love it in terms of our race, religion, gender, sexual orientation across the board. I think of it's a place that's very welcoming. And I want to see that continue and go forward. We've talked a lot about the outreach and the numbers, and as someone who's talked to a number of folks who I've known that have been part of this project, who live on the 800 block of West Jefferson and other areas in Ward 7, I don't dispute the fact that there's disagreement on this issue. I do not dispute that there are people who are opposed, and I don't think we can discount those who are supportive. And you'll hear me talk about that later. Since being elected in 2013, I've spent a lot of time taking phone calls from neighbors, from people who've called me up at 2 in the morning or upset about there's a group of kids outside. What are you going to do about this? Shots fired. How can you do something about our neighborhood? They beg us for action. And so since that time, I'm very proud of the neighborhood meetings that we've had with Gap Old Town Neighborhood Association. I'm proud of the Northwest Neighborhood Association. I've had small group meetings in residents' homes where we bring in the police, we bring in community development, we address some of these major issues. I want to see that continue, and I want to see that grow. And I'm inspired by the feedback and the passion that we've seen thus far, and I hope those folks stay involved. But as part of that do something mentality that we've gotten, I think it's important that people know that this isn't the first step. This council has taken a lot of innovative approaches to these types of issues, and I want to highlight some of them here. Number one, we supported the summer youth program in 2013 to target at-risk youth. We supported the assistant chief of police to handle the standards of professionalism. We'll talk more about that in a bit. Youth intervention specialist. We've gotten on social media. We've done a great job of trying to engage with neighbors and residents to help solve some of these issues. We took the political risk for mental health funding when we raised the sales tax. And no one wants to talk about a raised sales tax during an election cycle, but we believed it was important enough to this community that mental health be properly funded because our police are not trained for many of those issues. People are often working with the police on their worst day, and we want to make sure that our residents get the resources that they need. The chief has done an amazing job with these focus meetings on a bi-monthly basis. He's also joined me and Karen Schmidt and other aldermen in attending different meetings that we've been to, First Christian Church, other groups in the neighborhood around there talking about these issues, because the perennial question that I get is, what are you going to do to reduce crime this summer? What are you going to do to make sure that these issues do not continue, that I feel safe in my neighborhood? And as I've attended the meeting in December with BLM. I went to the listening session at Wayman A&E, but unfortunately I had to leave a little bit early, so I didn't catch some of it. But I got a good sense of where things were at. And I've dozens of phone calls, hundreds of emails, the whole shot, and I've learned a lot. And I can't set aside that as a white male, I have a certain privilege set that I cannot share in the experiences of others. But I really take very seriously the responsibility to hear everybody and engage them in the process and make sure that they get heard. And I want to hear some of these ideas. And I'm committed to doing everything to keep everybody who wants to weigh in on these issues engaged and part of the conversation. You can reach out to me. I'll get a cup of coffee with you or anything else if you want to talk about this stuff, because these are issues that we've been talking about for a long time, and I appreciate the chief and MCCA's attempts to come up with an innovative solution to these problems. But I want to focus on next steps here. This is one piece of a larger puzzle. We've heard comments about an advisory board for this community house. I think that's a great idea. You'd find my support for that, and I suspect we'll find people in the room that volunteer to be there. You're going to hear some more conversations about some of the accountability piece, too. I had a conversation about how sometimes people believe it's difficult to file a complaint with the police, and maybe it's not doing what we need to do. So I want those suggestions on how we can better our processes. Perhaps the Human Relations Commission weighs in, and they become a mechanism for people who can bring their concerns and can be investigated, because no one on this council here wants to see our neighborhood suffer. We want to see people engaged. We've been committed to it. We've seen our boards and commissions have diversity. We've done a great job with that piece. But I'm going to challenge everybody here. I think those folks who support this project, will you be there when we're having these community events? Will you be there to meet your neighbors? Will you be there to understand people's different struggles in life? Those who may be coming from different walks of life, who may like different music or may speak differently or have different educational backgrounds. Will you be there to continue to build that relationship? And for those of you who oppose it, will you be there to help us create a safe space where people feel comfortable to bring up their concerns? Will you be there to connect people who otherwise would never hear of these sorts of projects, who may be fearful? Will you be there to spread the word to make our community a more vibrant, more connected, more engaged location? I know that I'll be there. I know Karen will be there. I know this council will be there. This mayor will be there. Community organizations will be there. Will you be there? And with that, I'd like to make a motion that we approve as presented.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved by Alderman Black, second by Alderwoman Schmidt.
Mayor, just for the record, this will be approved via ordinance.
This is approved via ordinance, correct. Alderwoman Hellman and Alderman Lauer have had their...
I think
Kevin's
what was on first?
Kevin, you were first?
Well, just a couple little points here. Chief, do we have a formal neighborhood watch in that area? Okay, so there are neighbors that are engaged. And did we talk to those folks about this idea?
Well, first of all, they are the ones who conducted this survey,
I see.
not us. But through going to the neighborhood watch meetings, yes, they have been supportive. There have been neighbors over there. Through my neighborhood walks, I had been asked about this in the past, but people were talking about building one, and that
So
was
we're
just not
engaged with
feasible.
them, and we've been engaged with those folks on this particular subject for some time. Is that right?
Not this particular subject, but people have brought up a substation before. We're talking about a community house, but that idea has been brought up in the past. Yes.
Great. Is it your perception that these folks are trying to take personal responsibility for their own neighborhood?
Well, I think we're all trying to take responsible
Sure, but
for the area.
what I'm trying to do is get a sense of that neighborhood. I know that in my neighborhood, and I'm probably the only really true West Side resident on this board. I live truly on the West Side, and I am engaged in a neighborhood watch, and we do watch out for one another. And so I don't live in that immediate neighborhood, but it's important for us as a group to understand that those folks are engaged.
There are people that want to be engaged, and there are other people that we're going to have to engage.
Sure.
The way to engage people is to build trust.
Yep.
You can't build trust if you're not out there.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're trying to do, is be out there in a pro-social way. I mean, we're out there for other reasons at times, for calls for service. This gives people an opportunity for us to get to know them, and we get to know them, or they get to know us, I'm sorry.
And the intent here is that this is a positive engagement. Is that correct? We're trying to be put our best foot forward, trying to reach out, open-handed, welcoming, etc.
Yes, we're trying to be positive about it. I think, as Matt said, it is not something in Alderman Black that will occur overnight. But I think once people see that we are vested in it, then I believe, yes, we can have some positive results. I've spoken, I speak to my officers, and they know about it, and they're awaiting this just like everybody else.
Thank you very much.
Alderwoman Hellman.
Just two things. Matt, you showed multiple items that this project can do, and I'm curious, how and when will these be measured?
Well, one of the things I think we'll attempt to do is to begin looking back at the historical data that we have, the community impact measurement tool that we have, again, a nationally accepted research tool through NeighborWorks America, talks about neighborhood satisfaction, talks about safety, talks about engagement levels, talks, I think, frankly, about that very idea about how engaged neighbors are in their neighborhood, but more importantly, how much they feel they are able to affect change in their neighborhood. And I think one of the ways we'll look at is to look at what is currently the results of our most recent 2016 measurement and use that as a baseline as we move forward. It was brought up at the last listening session about whether we are willing to continue doing more listening sessions, and I think Alderman Black makes a great point. This is just the beginning of these conversations, and we are absolutely committed to continuing to engage residents in these ways. I hope that answers your question.
Essentially, if we have an advisory board, there'll be regular listening sessions because they'll be empowered to make those decisions.
And to be more specific in what we'd be tracking, because we receive grant funding, we have to measure, we have to keep track of every meeting that takes place, number of attendance, different things of that nature in order to report it back to our grant funding. So it'll be constant monitoring of all activities so we can report out that information as to how the facilities, the house is being used.
I want to go further than how the house is being used to, I don't know if you can go back to that.
And those are the community
Slide.
impact measures that Matt was talking about. So those measures try to measure those things in looking at larger scale data sets and to try to determine these things through continued surveying, continued canvassing, continued listening sessions in order to facilitate that feedback from the entire neighborhood. But I just wanted to make the point that we're going to do it from the micro all the way up to the macro, or did I do that?
Whichever.
And to do it at all levels. That way we are tracking the information and have that data to be able to share with the community as a whole, because this is a pilot project, and I think that there is a great responsibility that comes with that.
And I think the other thing to mention, and Stacy talked about this earlier, as we create memorandums of understanding with other nonprofit organizations, as Mid-Central Community Action does on a regular basis, other potential community stakeholders, within those memorandums of understanding are measurement tools and devices to see if that partnership is effective.
And that's what, I mean, I think it's wonderful that we're playing basketball with kids and stuff, but I want to know what the outcomes are, not just what the activities are. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, and then again, to illustrate that this is a pilot project, even if it were approved. Well, that's yet to be determined. Alderwoman Burgess, and then Alderman Milawambwe.
Thank you. Obviously, it's a little bit difficult to follow Alderman Black, who had extensive comments that were very well put, and I would like to thank Alderman Black for his leadership in this area. He doesn't just represent this area, he lives in this area, he is out there. You go to any community events, he's almost always there unless he's out of town, and he's engaged, and he always listens, he takes your calls. So if you haven't had the opportunity yet to interact with Alderman Black, I encourage people in this room with continuing concerns to do so. You will find that he is welcoming and open and really wants to represent this area. I think Scott made a very good point. It's been repeated by others, saying that this is not the first step. We're basically coming into a conversation that's already underway. The police department has taken great efforts in recent years to improve its community outreach. And I won't repeat everything, but I think the important thing is this conversation does not end tonight. Regardless of the outcome, this is a further step in a process. I don't believe any of us are under the illusion that this will solve our problems. that with passing this particular provision will be done. We won't be. This is a multifaceted, multi-layered issue that we are dealing with here. And that's why the council has taken other actions, and we talked about the mental health funding, $2.4 million per year to improve on that. That is a significant investment in our community to help implement that community action or the county action plan to hopefully begin making a difference there and to provide people with the assistance they need. I thought Mr. Donnelly also made some very good comments during the public comment portion, citing his concerns that this conversation, instead of being inclusive, has become divisive. And that concerns me because from my perception, I have been very encouraged by the large amounts of outreach we receive from the community. To me, regardless of the outcome, I think we have found many new allies in the community we can work with to provide us with greater perspective on how we can help improve our community. And so, again, I think this is the continuing of a conversation. I think that this particular proposal is the result of very considered and well thought out and well-researched community feedback, and I personally will be supporting it. I look forward to helping to make it a success. But for those of you who have concerns about it, please know that the conversation, as far as I'm concerned, and I think the other aldermen on the council are concerned, this conversation is not over, and we continue to want to hear from you.
Alderman Milawambwe.
Thank you. This has been a pretty interesting time. looking at this particular issue. There's a couple of things that I want to say. I know Alderman Black has been very eloquent, so I would second that in terms of laying out, his thoughts and the issues. When I initially heard about this, and again, I also want to echo what Michael Donnelly has said. I was a little bit disappointed that the issue had become a little bit divisive in the community because I think, most of us want to do the right thing. And what has informed some of my thoughts is my experience with Brendan, the chief, Hefner. When we initially hired him as the chief, I knew right away. There were many candidates, who came through and who seemed very polished. But what I liked about Brandon, he was very direct and plain spoken. So I felt like we knew what we were getting. So in that sense, I am stepping out on faith a little bit here, and I'm saying, I'm going to put trust in Brandon's leadership, and I'm asking everybody in the community to do the same thing. It's somewhat of a risk that we're taking. We're trying something different. Um, but we also know that we do have an opportunity as a community that cares about each other to take a step back afterwards and say, we tried this and it didn't work. What do we do next? So that's what I would like to ask everybody to do tonight. Let's not be divisive. Let's not tear each other up for what we're trying to do. But at the same time, I also want to say that um, the BLM group, has brought up some issues that made me thinking. If you know me, I'm not someone who's, confrontational in my approach. I tend to be pretty calm, and and people may disagree with the approach and then how people go about doing things, but uh, at the same time, I thought to myself, particularly after attending the MLK dinner on the ISU campus where the speaker talked about this, he says, all of us have a responsibility to listen deeply, no matter how the message is delivered. And that's what I try to do. So I think there are still some significant concerns. They brought up some concerns that I think are valid and that we should investigate. Some people talked about, what are the root causes of some of the issues over there. So, and as a good example, a good question for all of us, as a council is to think about, where is our money better spent? Do we do it in more policing, putting more police officers who cost a lot of money to train and, hire, retain, and also provide benefits? So do we do it in programs, that would also help us reduce crime in whatever areas of the city? So those are a couple of the thoughts that I have, and I think we should definitely think about that in terms of how we work with our budget next year and in future years as well. Thank you.
Okay. We are technically out of time, so I will need a motion to extend because then we have at least three alder persons who would like to speak. Can
Make
we
that motion.
make that motion
Yes.
to extend the time for
Extend the time, yes, for discussion.
another
Yes.
10 minutes or so? Second by Alderwoman Howman. Okay, if you will go ahead and vote on extending the time on this because obviously it's an important issue. Okay. The motion carries 9-0. We have, if you could start the clock again, we've got another 10 minutes. Okay. And let's see, Alderwoman Painter, I saw you first.
I was wondering, have you talked to Normal about the success of their police substation or how that's worked out? I know that I've been over there with the master gardeners, and it seemed all right, and I've read Panagraph articles that were positive, and I just wondered if you'd talk to them and how that's turning out.
I've been in their substation more when I was with state police, and it has worked out well for them. It was actually built after they had a very tragic event there. Um, but this is different. This is different in that it is actually in a neighborhood. Now, I'm not saying anything bad about it because it has worked. I think the Panagraph denoted that it helped reduce crime. And while we will have a presence just with the community house there, we're going to be out and being more active, and we will also be there and available to engage people. And like I said, just good conversations, getting to know people. Because I know there are some people that aren't trusting. You have to build up trust. So when we have to, unfortunately, do a neighborhood canvas or something like that, maybe we can get more information. But yes, I've been there many times. I mean, I've taken people there who we've arrested and interviewed them and things of that nature. That would not be happening at the community house. So it is different, but they have had positive results.
Okay, well, I was emailed a video that showed a police officer attempting to do community policing in that area, and quite frankly, it was horrifying. And, you know, I hope that there is ongoing training so that situations like that don't happen in the future. And I believe these people who say that they have had bad experiences. Um, I'm just wondering, I mean, I'm sure that there are police officers that you could place there that have the soft skills, the intelligence, and the compassion to reach out in an effective way in the community. Um, I'm wondering, you know, what kind of ongoing training are they getting in community engagement? And I know you'd also mentioned that according to your rules, that there will be national experts that will be helping with that. Um, what is, what's the plan?
Well, we get training, but let's understand that I can't put the cart before the horse.
Right.
I mean, I've seen that video. I've seen other videos. I will quite frankly tell you, there's differences of opinion on that video. However, we can always improve upon anything that we do. And, I don't want a couple officers who are good at reaching out to people. I would like all of our officers to be professional when they reach out to people. Let's bear in mind that everybody's not always happy when we meet them, okay? But we will always strive to be professional. I always preach that in how we do things. So that's all I can tell you. We always preach communication. We talk to our supervisors. We talk to people. I talked to an officer. I didn't even get a complaint. Talked to an officer because someone had told me that maybe they didn't show enough empathy at a crash. And the officer thought about it and just said, I'll try to do better. I mean, sometimes it's just a variance of opinions, but we always try to do the best we can. Um, as he brought up, we have the Office of Professional Standards. We do have a very good system in which to file a complaint, if you file the complaint. I mean, there's also other guidelines that we have, but we have an assistant chief who oversees that, and another officer. We follow up on everything, everything. So, and that will continue. That's not going to change.
Okay, thank you. Well, I can see that crime is a salient issue in this area, and I don't think that can be ignored. And I don't think that we will make any progress by burying our heads in the sand and not moving forward with this. However, I do think that we all have to listen and listen very closely to the complaints of the citizens in the community when they come up. Because if we don't, we're going to have problems that will be immeasurably worse. Thank you.
Alderman, I'm going to go to Fruin because he hasn't spoken yet, and then end with Alderwoman Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor. Mine will be very short and somewhat repetition, but I think it's important. I'm going to enlarge this a little bit, but I can't remember too many issues that have come before us that have generated so much engagement as this has. And it's an extremely important decision for everybody in the community. But what I've heard and what I've experienced up here is, if I can enlarge this a little bit, is reminding, and Scott and others have reminded us what we have done in the past to help the West Side neighborhoods. I think that's very important to keep in mind. So whether it's the city has done that, the West Bloomington Revitalization Project, or all the other community partners, we have a lot of people working to improve that area. I think if you look at our council votes over recent years, whether it's policing, whether it's housing or streets or whatever, I think the entire community would see that we've been very committed. And with that, I feel very confident that this is a pilot. I'm going to be supportive of it. If it works, great. If it doesn't, we can revise our plan. But I'm confident that the city will continue to do what we can to help those in our most challenging neighborhoods, and policing is a very important part of that. So it's important that the public is engaged, and I thank everybody for their comments.
Alderwoman Schmidt.
Thank you. I just want to offer a few reflections. I've been working in this area for more years than I care to count, and I really love this particular section of town. It's where we started as a community. I want to thank Alderman Black for your willingness to engage on every single issue. You have never said no to anybody, whether you wanted to hear it or haven't wanted to hear it. You have heard it and digested it, and I appreciate that. I also want to say thank you to Alderman Painter for just addressing sort of, the issues that we have raised this evening and previously. I mean, I think we have to really take this very honestly, listen to the concerns that we've heard very honestly. One of the things that's really struck me is maybe something reflecting on what Mike Donnelly had to say is, when you're working in a neighborhood for, well longer than a decade, you build relationships with people, and people will tell you things. And they might not want to tell Chief Hefner, and they might not want to tell David Hales, but if I'm on my book bike, or I'm walking down the street, or I'm working in my garden, people will tell me things. And a lot of times the things they tell me, I say, you know what, you need to take that to Chief Hefner, because he's not going to put up with it, and we need to make that right. And I guess I see this house as an opportunity that has come along that will open that door, because we really need to begin to talk to one another. And I would just remind all of us right now, in this country, right now, we have to respect each other and listen to one another and love one another and hold hands and be a community. And I think that this community house is that opportunity in a section of Bloomington that can use this kind of confirmation of what it means to be neighbors and to be a community. And I'm glad for that opportunity, and I really, as Scott and Diana both said, we need to take this step, and then we need to assess it, and we need to keep pushing it ahead.
Okay.
Just one quick
Alderman Lauer,
question.
yeah.
Just like to know where you stand on this issue, sir. You don't normally vote, but I'd like to know as a leader, is this something that you support or not?
Good question. I'm sure it has nothing to do with you running for office. I'm not going to be voting on this, but I could veto it, but I'm not going to veto it. And one of the things that we have to understand is those of you who are involved, obviously most people who are involved in here are here because you're opposed to this. That's quite clear. There's nothing that I'm going to be able to say or others. Essentially what we can do is we see this is a pilot. If you have complaints, if you're afraid to go to file it with the police, you can come from me. I will show you how you can file the complaints if we have issues. If this doesn't work, we don't have to stick with it. But the main thing I would would ask all of you who are involved, if this vote goes the way that it seems to tonight, and that is, uh, don't be discouraged. We need you to stay involved, especially in this environment. We cannot go backwards. Mostly we have been making progress in our community. Don't let the negative voices bring us backward. And my door is always open to all of you. And so while I don't actually vote on this evening, I would have the option to veto it. My guess is my veto would be overridden if I vetoed it. But let's give this a chance. But if you don't win this evening, don't be discouraged. Please stay involved. And if you want to figure out ways to stay involved, maybe we put together an advisory committee. Frankly, I'm more interested in the advisory committee than I am, with all due respect, the experts and consultants from outside. I'm more interested in the people who are on the ground in the immediate neighborhoods who are going to be giving us the feedback for how to operate this and to move this forward. If it doesn't work, we will try something else. And we want you to stay engaged. If you also want to be involved, even if it's not on this advisory group, there are lots of board and commission appointments that are up. We have, as Alderman Black mentioned, we have a much more representative group of boards and commission people. We have gays, straights, people of color. We have millennials. We have East Siders. We have West Siders. And we have a much more diverse group of people, and we're going to make better decisions moving forward because of that. I mean on planning and zoning, the library board. If you are all interested, obviously you're here today. If you're holding up a sign, you're involved. Stay involved. And if you want to come and talk to me about other ways that you can continue to get involved, my door's open. You don't have to come to a mayor's open house. Call and make an appointment and come talk to me. So at this point, I think we are going to vote on this issue. Should we say we, the council, and I vote is in favor of the motion as it has been presented. The motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. And at this point, we will move to city manager's discussion.
No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to observe decorum. Apologize.
Mayor, I have no report for tonight. Thank you.
Okay. At this point, I just want to thank everybody who's leaving for being involved, and democracy is going to work better if we all stay involved. I'm going to aldermanic comments, and I have Alderwoman Painter.
Thanks. I'd like to address the Hershey Road issue. I know we're receiving a number of comments and concerns about this, many of them from Ward 9, and all the heat Alderman Fruin's been taking from this is certainly unfortunate. I deeply appreciate the unanimous support this decision received from all of us, and I'm sure we could all benefit from having the facts in front of us as we respond to our constituents. Perhaps Nora could help craft some talking points addressing this issue, which would be helpful to us as we talk to people about this. I'd be happy to assist with that. On a personal note, I've heard talk that I did this for my ward as a way to get cheap votes, which is laughable. I know that any kind of change, no matter how minor, will create great political upheaval. I also began this conversation with Jim Karch in May of 2014. Since I first stepped into this position, I've heard concerns and complaints about the speed limit in that area. Then the announcement of the Kroger superstore brought it all to a head. This decision was not made just to placate the residents of Spring Ridge. This decision was also intended to help the residents further up the road between GE and Route 9 who have experienced 43 accidents in the past year alone. And that's because people just don't slow down when they're coming into that neighborhood. Consistency of speed is important, and the speed changes 3 times in the stretch between Fort Jesse and Route 9. This area has been controversial since the early 70s when it was first being developed. The community planners and the developers have been at odds over the area for decades. Fortunately, when Summerfield and Garling Heights went in, I believe it was Herman Dirks who ensured that the homes would not face Hershey. However, that decision doesn't affect the traffic flow further south. While I'm certainly sympathetic to the fact that many people feel inconvenienced by this change will slow them down in this 1 mile stretch less than 1 minute. And personally, I feel that public safety trumps convenience. Our decision basically boiled down to what we want our neighborhoods to look like and citizen safety. Thank you.
Other aldermanic comments? Wow, enough said. Is there a motion? Oh, I'm sorry.
I thank you, Johnny, for that. And how do we get this information out to people? I am just struck by the level of misinformation that we have, and I don't know whether Nora can develop some talking points or we put something on our website. It feels as though somehow we've pitted one neighborhood against another, and it is so unfortunate. It is a much bigger conversation than this. Right. And, I don't know what the answer to this is, but I think collectively, you're right. We all supported it. We all need to find a way when we get these questions to be able to provide the talking points and get behind it and help everybody understand that it was not arbitrary or, specific. So whatever that is, I'm Nora or David or somebody.
And if I could just say, would be happy to kind of give that a shot. I do think some frequently asked questions and answers would be helpful. We do need to kind of stress again that ultimately, even the manual on uniform traffic control devices, says ultimately it does become a policy decision. But so many people, as I've been reading these, kind of feel that the decision should only be based on maybe accident ratios or this or that, and that's not the case. Yeah, a lot of that factual and those professional opinions are made, but it's no one set piece of data. And ultimately, you as the council take all that into consideration and then make that policy decision go forward. But I do think this can also be tied into the complete streets philosophy too, and safety, and how safety for all users of the roadway is paramount. And that's what I see in part, of why many of you made that decision going forward, is that enhanced safety that comes from lower speed limits.
And just to clarify, when I've been asked, and even at the open house, when people say, well, this was just, an alderwoman responding to constituents, I said, yeah, actually, there's like 100 and some people signed this. I have them in my office. I think that's called democracy, right? And so we have to understand those values as well.
We all saw the
We all saw it, and this is an alderwoman responding to constituents. Imagine if you had a petition of over 100 and you did nothing. But you didn't. Thank you, Johnny. Alderman Fruin. I got to get my gender straight here.
Sure, I'll be short. And Johnny, I appreciate your comments. And I think we've talked about enough in here in the last 2 or 3 meetings. And I know we've got Linden Street still on the stage for discussion. And this whole communication thing, this is bigger than Hershey, and it's bigger than complete streets. Some people refer to the hard copy, the pantograph. Some people like their radio. Some people like social media. It's just hard to reach everybody in today's world. And there's a lot of people, we know it up here, that are not very engaged in their neighborhood or their community events until it impacts them. So I think it's much bigger than Hershey, and it's much bigger than complete streets. But we're going to have other similar streets like this, whether it's Linden or some other street. So we're going to have to make sure we have good communication pieces with our overall philosophy, and then drill it down to the particular street. But it's a challenge for us, and people are very engaged. And I'm not a regular reader of the next door websites, but there's so many social media sites out there now that people are out there making comments, and it's hard to grasp them all. It's hard to bring them all together, but hopefully we can learn from this and move forward. And I think the challenge, we keep talking about Nora. I don't know if she's still here. We'll put the finger on her, but she's gonna have to be the mastermind that is as proactive as possible. And you know, off the top of my head, I can think of a couple things. I think Mayor, maybe you and the city manager go on JVC after a city council meeting. Is that correct?
We do. Several, JVC and GLT, sometimes the TV station.
And I apologize to both of you for not being more attentive to those, but maybe to some extent, maybe being proactive and telling the listeners, you know, as David does in his emails, here's some things that are coming up in the next month or two that the community might want to be engaged in. So anyway, we all understand it. We just need to make sure we're doing everything we can to communicate to everybody. So thanks, Johnny, for your comments.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Alderman Black. Is there a second? Second by Alderwoman Howe. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.